Welcome to this very interesting program. We're looking at brands and organizations. Brands are very critical to organizational transformation because it brings perception, it shows how organizations are effective, and it also shows their sustainable strategies to become leading players in the market. And I have here, on the auspices of the recent breakfast hosted by Phillips Consulting, Mr. Dr. DeVilliers, the chairman and CEO of InterbrandSampsonDeVilliers. Great to have you, sir.
Great to be here, thank you.
And the host of the recent breakfast is one that has not only been a player in organizational transformation, but in Nigerian's economy, Mr. Phillips, yes. Chairman of Phillips Consulting. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
And so brands. First, I would like to ask you, Mr. Doug, how critical is a brand to an organizational culture and transformation?
Well, obviously it's very critical. I think the key thing these days is that more organizations are finally recognizing the brand standalone as an organizational asset, as something that provides true value and revenue flow to organizations, and not just a pretty logo or a nice t-shirt or an advertising campaign. Branding is so much bigger than that. Advertising and PR are all the activation components, but organizations are now looking at their brand and their brand reputation and managing it as a strategic asset and understanding it. If you leverage and you use it properly, you actually add massive value to the company, and you generate revenue, and you change the business. And big brands have proven this for years. But we're seeing specifically here in Nigeria at the moment a huge amount of attention past the sort of 5 years ago of rebadging organizations, getting a new logo, to the brand now becoming a strategic business tool, which is exactly the role that it needs to play.
Wow, very interesting to know that it's not just having a brand, but you have to be consistent in managing the asset and even the changes that occur. And now, Mr. Phillips, as a Nigerian and African, your brand is well known for organizational transformation, training, and consulting. But I'd like to know the brand that influenced you from your youthful days, even as you evolved as a major player in the Nigerian economy.
Well, okay. I think one interesting thing about brands is the fact that I always nowadays change the word brand to brag. It's like saying that what are your bragging rights in order to have a brand? What is your brand bragging about? And from that perspective, I think that certainly the kind of organizations that influenced me, and looking just at the Nigerian market, let's not sort of go global because there are a lot of major global players, but look at the Nigerian market. The brand that actually impressed me, funny enough, was that of somebody who became a mentor to me, and that is Akintola Williams, who actually set up Akintola Williams, the accounting firm, which eventually joined up with Deloitte to form Akintola Williams Deloitte. But it was interesting that I, as an individual, recognized the power of that person as a leader, somebody who had such impeccable character and pedigree, which for me overlaid his organization. And therefore, when you look at Akintola Williams, certainly in those days, you could see a kind of call it an aura around that firm, which was replicated from what the leader showed. So I think going back to what Doug has said, I think for me, they were not an organization that was advertising or making a lot of noise being an accounting firm, and yet they had a very, very strong reputation which people could trust. And certainly from the point of view of that individual, it was a brand that I certainly recognize as being very, very powerful in the country.
Essentially, if I can interject, that sort of approach that Phillips has put forward is really, really important. If you look at even the big brands of the world, lots of them were built by individuals that, when they commenced, were quite small. And whether you're talking about Virgin, through Richard Branson, whether you're talking about Bill Gates and Microsoft, whether you're talking about Serge and the guys at Google, we forget that not all brands were, in fact, no brands were born big. They started in little places. 3 of the top 5 brands in the global top 100 brands by value in the world were started in garages. They were small businesses that did not concentrate on a logo, did not concentrate on an advertising campaign. They concentrated on the vision of an individual and the ability of the organization to deliver on that visual all the time. And these organizations became trusted and liked and topical and spoken about. And that's what they grew from. Nobody goes and buys an Apple because you like the logo. You buy it because you like what it stands for. But the vision that was behind it is actually quite recent. And we tend to incorrectly focus on what we regard as the big brands, but the big brands were small brands. And the biggest opportunities that we've got at the moment, continentally in Africa, but I also believe very specifically here in Nigeria, is that there are some outstanding organizations with outstanding products and a great market. But the brand itself is still being used as a tactical communication tool as opposed to something that strategically brings more value to that business and will actually bring more value to the economy as a whole. So how do we take the Oandos, the Dangotes, the UBAs, these massive brands that sit within this environment and build those brands as something that adds value as opposed to just a communication device? The opportunity sits here.
Yeah, and also you find that Doug mentioned the big brands. There are a lot of quiet brands in Nigeria, which is really the essence of part of the discussions we were having yesterday. A lot of very quiet brands that don't appreciate the fact that they're extremely powerful brands and haven't sort of brought to the fore the power of their brands. We have brands that have been around. We had yesterday at the function Mr. Chelarams. Chelarams is like about the fifth generation. And quietly, it's underplaying its brand, and it's not really bringing it to the fore. We have even the likes of Flour Mills, who as an organization has been around for many years, again from another family. And you find that again, they're not, and they're spending a lot of money, they're making massive investments in the economy, but they're being very, very quiet. So the whole idea is that, look, we must have strong African brands. We must have brands that in a way are raised, are sort of made a bit more visible and more aware, so that individuals can get value from it. So you go and you find that you're quoted on the stock exchange, where we're saying over and above your net asset value, what more can I add that is peculiar to me as an organization because of that brand, that bragging rights that I have, based on pedigree, based on trust, based on performance, based on having been there for a long, long time. And I think we need to do this. We need to revisit this so that we can bring additional value to organizations in order to make them more successful.
And it's a strategic approach. I think what we've seen certainly in the last 10 or 15 years in the market here specifically is a lot of rebadging. So we saw it primarily in the financial sector, where a lot of organizations went out and created a new logo. There was an element of strategic, obviously, thought behind it. But ultimately, there was a huge amount of noise around the rebranding, but ultimately the rebadging of a whole host of organizations. Very topical, very visible, very expensive, and unfortunately, in many circumstances, with quite low impact. Now, what Lucius just said right now is absolutely right. The ability of commercial brands in any market can change the entire country's perception, but it's a strategic plan. So if you look at South Korea, and what has happened between Samsung and Hyundai and a host of these brands, they've changed the entire perception of a country. Mercedes and BMW did it many years ago for Germany, but ultimately this is quite recent history, and we forget that in 10 years the world is changing so rapidly. So the opportunity sits here to strategically find the brand that could literally reposition the country or the continent. And there have been a few. I mean, James Mwangi in East Africa, in Kenya, with Equity Bank, has become an amazing brand. The M-Pesa, and from very small, humble beginnings, M-Pesa as a digital money platform has changed the world's perception of innovation in Africa. And the logo itself is not particularly pretty. And in fact, it really needs help. But that's not the point. The business, the brand, the delivery, the reputation behind it is perfect. This economy here, and even down to my neck of the woods in Southern Africa, we're lacking that ability to transform that innovation, those good companies, the little ones even, into massive, massive brands that just stand for something different. As opposed to doing the advertising that we did last year plus 10%. Because the shouting needs to stop. We now need to find deeper relevance.